No, it's stable, and in fact, it's remarkably stable from the first survey that we did in 2002. It's been stable across the 3 surveys that we've done so far, which is a good thing. There are obviously changes in the different kinds of drugs. For example, what we call new psychoactive substances, which is jargon speak for the head shop drugs, obviously feature for the first time in this survey, so that we wanted to pick that up. But yes, I think there is a particular issue about young men, and I think we do need to target efforts at young men because they're more vulnerable as well in terms of the impact of the recession generally. And we know that from the Institute of Public Health report that they're much more vulnerable in terms of their mental and physical health to the recession. And if drugs are entering the mix as well, we just need to look at that.
When we talk about recent drug use, is it predominantly cannabis, which I know there is an argument to be made for not as damaging in the long term as other drugs, or is it just a mix of drugs that these people are taking?
Well, it's largely, in terms of the sort of percentages of the illegal drugs, it's largely cannabis. But it's not, it doesn't come across in this particular phase of the study. There will be further bulletins, but a lot of it is what we call polydrug use, and you're getting other drugs, cocaine, ecstasy, but particularly alcohol in the mix as well. And I think the Minister, in her remarks at the launch of the bulletin today, the long-term mental health effects of the cannabis that's available now, the much stronger form, which is usually called skunk or weed. So I don't think anybody should be complacent that it's just cannabis on the basis of the fact that what's available now is far, far stronger and seems to be much riskier in terms of the strength of the cannabis that's available now.
There was a lot of talk when the head shop drugs were... I suppose when there was concern about the head shop drugs and the type of drug that were out there, they were untested, people didn't know what they were. This seems to suggest that young people just started taking them regardless of the risks that were being highlighted.
Well, I think a lot of people thought that because they were available over the counter that somebody had in fact tested them. But there was a lot, because the drugs were new, people were, it's a horrible phrase, felt disempowered in terms of responding to them. But I think what people like myself were saying, is that while they're new on the market, there's nothing novel about them. They actually they were mimicking existing drugs. They were mimicking the herbal smoking mixtures, were mimicking cannabis. The bath salts and plant feeders, as they were called, were mimicking cocaine and ecstasy. And some of the other ones that have been recently controlled, like the salvia plant, were mimicking LSD and magic mushrooms. So that while the names of the drugs were different, the effects on the body weren't really any different from what we already had on the market. It's a good thing that the act that helped the Gardaí close down the head shops, and then the recent move by the government in relation to the Misuse of Drugs Act, I think it just reinforces the fact that these are chemicals that people really shouldn't be shoving into their bodies because, as you said, they had never been tested in the way that any chemical, whether that chemical was a hair dye or whether it was a medicine, would have been tested before it could be put on the market.
One of the survey findings that stands out for me, you talk about rates of drug use being stable, but if you look at the lifetime use of cannabis, I suppose that's the number of people who've tried cannabis at some point in their life, that's gone up from 22% to 25%. And the number of people who've tried cocaine at some point in their life has gone from 5% to 7%. So is that indicating, the figures are relatively small, but more of a tolerance?
No, I think it would be more worrying if those increases had been translated or moved into the last year, which is recent use, and then more particularly last month, which was current use. And since those are the two, the last year and last month are much more important from the picture of what's actually happening. Because the last year, or the lifetime use, is one that will always increase because you got more people, if you like, becoming eligible to use drugs. And then the older generation that wouldn't have had the opportunity to use drugs, they would be moving out of the survey period because we survey people between 15 and 64. So that, lifetime prevalence it's an accumulative figure. So, I mean, it to me, it really highlights experimentation, and I'd rather people didn't. But the fact that they're not then moving forward into the same number of people using the drug on a regular basis. I think that's the encouraging thing.
Yeah, men are more likely to experiment with drugs. They're more likely to try different types of drugs. But the findings also showed there was a greater prevalence of women in the 15 to 24 age group using other opiates. Now, that includes legally available medicines and over-the-counter painkillers compared to young men. How would you interpret those figures?
Well, it may be biological. That they need painkillers at certain times of the month. I mean, a lot of that figure is quite legitimate medical use of those. But what we're trying to get is where people might be running into problems because, for example, we know in the United States that a significant part of their problem is prescription painkillers. And we're just trying to get a handle to see whether, hopefully, that would never happen here. But we just have to be vigilant in terms of looking at people's patterns of use of using painkillers. Now, some of that would be prescription painkillers, but the rest of it would be, and a large proportion of it, I suspect, are the codeine-containing products. But there is a concern about people becoming addicted to codeine, and we don't have a handle on that. We need to get a handle on that. We wouldn't get it through the population survey, but we need to get a handle on that because there is an increasing feeling on the ground that more and more, and particularly women, are becoming addicted to codeine and will need treatment for that codeine addiction.
I suppose people don't consider codeine to come under the category of other opiates. That's probably where the confusion would lie. Finally, Dr. Corrigan, I know we've been talking about illegal drugs for the most part, but you also cover alcohol and cigarettes, and we're all getting very het up at the moment over cheap alcohol sales and people drinking to excess. It's coming up to Christmas. There will be people drinking to excess, but what your survey is finding is that current use of alcohol and current use of tobacco, both of them are on the way down.
Yeah, that's encouraging. But I think what we need to do is actually dig into the data a little bit deeper. We will have a separate bulletin on alcohol coming out early in the new year. We're working on it at the moment, where we're looking at levels of binge drinking, levels of harmful drinking, and levels of alcohol dependence, because we've specifically expanded the survey to include those aspects of alcohol use.
What's the level of binge drinking that you would be concerned about? I mean, there's some reports say 4 pints is too much, some reports say 10 pints is too much. Where are you setting your bar?
Well, I think the bar we're setting is at something in the region of 3.6 units of 6 standard drinks.
So that's 3 pints?
With 3 pints, over 3 pints on any one occasion.
Is a binge?
Is a binge, yeah. I mean, like most people, Irish people wouldn't consider that binge drinking, but internationally that would be considered, that cut-off figure would be considered high. Some people would say 5 standard drinks would be 2.5 pints of beer, would be or sort of 5 glasses of wine or 5 glasses of spirits would be like there's no standard international definition. Okay. But I think we've gone for a figure that's roughly halfway between the available figures. But there's no doubt, I mean, I don't have the figures because we haven't seen them yet, but there's no doubt from previous surveys that most of us who drink in this country binge drink on a regular basis. And that's not good for us.
No, but if the bar is set at 3 pints, then we're all doing a lot of damage. OK, Dr. Des Corrigan, we look forward to talking to you when that survey is released early in the new year. The other figure there, the tobacco use, down from 33% to 28% in the survey. So the people who are opposed to smoking will no doubt be happy with that figure. Des Corrigan, thanks for talking to us.
Good to talk to you, Jonathan.